Hello everybody, we're back outside. So today we're going to be talking about my favorite and least favorite casting choices for book to movie adaptations. In this video, I'm just going to be oscillating back and forth between best and worst, but I'm also going to try and keep like IPs and franchises together, if that makes any sense. There will be crazy amounts of spoilers in this video. I'm spoiling so much. Here's a list of every single IP I'm going to be spoiling. If you don't want to be spoiled or you are only interested in certain franchises and characters, timestamps will be in the description. Also, just a quick disclaimer, I'm not here to be a hater. I don't think that saying someone maybe wasn't your favorite casting choice or wasn't the greatest actor is hating. And I also want to just point out that a lot of people on the worst list aren't here because they're bad actors. I just don't think they were the right fit in terms of it being an adaptation. And overall, it doesn't make you a hater to criticize a piece of art and the work that went into that piece of art. That's just what happens when you're critically thinking about the media that you're consuming. It's okay to have a couple criticisms. We're not here to be haters. We're not here to drag anyone down for superfluous reasons. We're just here to discuss my thoughts and opinions on casting choices. And I will say I do have a couple controversial ones, especially when it comes to Game of Thrones and Harry Potter. So we're gonna start out kind of light and simple, but I might get canceled by the end of this video, I swear to God. Okay, so first we're gonna start with a best, and that's gonna be Sasha Peters, I don't really know, cast as Allison De Laurentiis in the Pretty Little Liars adaptation.
He's your sister's boyfriend, and he's like old. It looked like you were into it. I hope not, because if you were, that would make you a skank.
Sasha completely embodies Allie, both in her acting and in her physical appearance. She is exactly what I was imagining when I read those books as a kid. And I also think it says something, the fact that Sasha was 14 during season 1 of Pretty Little Liars. Meanwhile, all of her coworkers were like anywhere from like 20 to 25. So the fact that this 14-year-old is not only able to hold her own next to all these grown adult actresses, but is also convincingly like in control of them, shows her power. And I think she does this mean girl act really well, of that girl that's like so awful and so mean, and yet you want to be her friend, you want to be her, you kind of want to fuck her. And that's a great segue into our worst choice for Pretty Little Liars, and that is Shay Mitchell as Emily Fields. Now, Shay is here purely because she comes off so straight, and I'm not personally someone who thinks like queer characters must be played by queer actors. I think it's preferable, but at the same time, sexuality is pretty invisible. And so I do think as long as you're portraying something convincing, I'm not really gonna throw a fuss about it. But Shay Mitchell wasn't convincing. There's literally nothing about her to me that reads as queer. And every single time she was kissing one of her love interests, I was just sitting there like, girl, are you sure you're gay? Because you kind of look like you want to kill yourself right now. So I just think Shay Mitchell could not play a convincingly queer character in the same way that Jonathan Bailey or Neil Patrick Harris can play a convincingly straight character, or Natasha Lyonne can play a convincingly lesbian character. I just don't think Shay Mitchell, I think she's super straight. That's really it. I also think there is kind of an elephant in the room to anyone who's read the books, and that is that Shay Mitchell looks nothing like what Emily Fields is described as. Emily is described as pale and freckled and strawberry blonde, and that is just not Shay Mitchell. But quite frankly, I don't care. I don't think that Emily's appearance really has any effect on her character, and I also just, you're never going to get me to give a fuck about a person of color being cast in a traditionally white role, as long as that recasting and race changing isn't like completely changing the messaging of the story and the character. That's Shay Mitchell for you. Next up, we have another best, and that is Theo James as 4 in the Divergent series trilogy. I think Theo James, number 1, he's hot, and 4 is hot, and so little 12, 13-year-old me was stoked stoked when Theo James was announced to be playing 4. I also think he just gets across the nonverbal aspects of 4 so well. 4 is in this really uncomfortable position because he is in like a leadership role. He's in a position of power. He's also in Dauntless, which is, you know, a faction that prioritizes bravery and putting aside your own emotions and stuff like that. And so I think Theo James does great at acting a person who is clearly falling for Tris and very attracted to Tris, but also cannot let him show that. And I think that's a really difficult acting place to be in, because you're acting like someone in love, acting like someone not in love. So there's like a multi-layer thing to it. And I just think Theo James's nonverbal acting is really good. And I just think when I imagine 4, it's pretty close to how Theo James represents him. Okay, I'm gonna move. It's hot as balls, which sucks because this view is fantastic. Isn't it pretty? All right, next up for a worst, we're gonna be talking about Kenneth Branagh as Hercule Poirot. If you saw my video tier ranking literary men I would cover my drink around, you know that I love Hercule Poirot and I don't love Kenneth Branagh's Hercule Poirot.
I didn't kill him! You tried to burn Ratchet's accounts, but they are still legible in places the math do not tally, because you have been stealing from him. It is full of what is the English word, the chocolate, the fudge? Fudge! It is full of the fudge!
I just think he misses the entire point of Hercule. Hercule is very like fun and whimsical, but also like very chill and analytical and relaxed, and I just think Kenneth Branagh completely misses that. He plays Hercule in this very like action hero type of way, where I feel like book Hercule gets off on like the mystery of things. He's always trying to walk people through it, when the reality is he could just come in and be like, yeah, this is who did it, this is how he did it, this is when he did it. He comes in and he like walks people through the steps. That's what gets Hercule excited, and I just think that entire demeanor about him is completely missed in the Kenneth Branagh versions, in favor of making it this very like Hollywood blockbuster action type of thing, and that's just not who Hercule is. He prioritizes like intelligence and thoughtfulness over brash action. Now we're going to talk about Harry Potter for a couple different characters. First, starting with a best, we have Emma Watson as Hermione Granger.
What? What? That's what you think?
Yeah, that's what I think.
You know the solution then, don't you?
Go on.
Next time there's a ball, pluck up the courage and ask me before somebody else does. And not as a last resort. Where have you been? Never mind, off to bed, both of you.
I kind of don't really have to explain this one. Emma Watson is Hermione Granger. She just is. She was pretty much, I mean, most of the children in the Harry Potter series were typecast to just sort of be who they are. And I think a perfect example of this is when Emma Watson tells the story about how she would learn every single person's lines, and so they kept having to scrap takes and like kept getting mad at her because she'd be silently mouthing along with the other actors as they were saying their lines, and it was like ruining takes. And I think that's just the most Hermione thing she could have ever done. When I read the books, as much as I love Daniel Radcliffe and Rupert Grint in the roles of Harry and Ron, they are not what I imagine in my head as I'm reading. Emma Watson is what I imagine. I literally cannot separate Emma Watson from Hermione. Like, I hear her voice, I see her mannerisms. She is Hermione Granger in my mind. Then, continuing with Harry Potter, we have a worst, and that would be Bonnie Wright as Ginny Weasley. Unfortunately, I think we all saw this one coming.
I was only wondering when Harry got here.
Harry? Harry who?
Harry Potter, of course.
I think I'd know if Harry Potter was at my house, wouldn't I?
His trunk's in the kitchen, and he's out. You haven't seen him, have you? Apparently he's wandering about the house.
Ginny Weasley is in my top 5 favorite characters of the entire series, so to have her butchered so horribly in the adaptation, like, really broke my heart, to be honest. Ginny is such a strong, mature, cool person, and that's just doesn't come across in the movies at all. And Harry and Ginny's relationship is like really good and mature, and you can feel why they're into each other. They have a lot in common, but the movies just completely butchers that. There is like zero chemistry between Bonnie Wright and Daniel Radcliffe. A lot of people, whenever talking about what went wrong with Ginny, I think go really far, and they're like, you know, no hate to Bonnie Wright, she did the best she could, it's the writer's fault, the writing was awful.
You know, maybe my anxiety was about like, oh, I'm going to be seen as like badly portraying this character, rather than later realizing, well, I wasn't really given the opportunity to do that, so it wasn't really my, you know, fault exactly.
And no hate to Bonnie Wright, yes, and the writing was awful, yes, but her acting was bad, and I think we can acknowledge that. And I think people are just way more comfortable to blame the writers because it's like this faceless, nameless entity. Meanwhile, it does feel kind of like being a hater to be like, oh, this specific person wasn't very good at acting. But I'm sorry that Bonnie Wright was not very good at acting in this role. I haven't seen her in anything else, but purely as Ginny, I don't think she understood Ginny as a character, and I don't think she really infused much personality into the lines. And as an example of this, I'm just gonna like pick one scene of Ginny's and act it in a way that I think maybe infuses a little bit more of Ginny's humor, just to show that like the writing is bad, but there are acting choices that do lead to it coming off so stiff. I was only wondering when Harry got here. Harry Potter, of course. Well, his trunk's in the kitchen, and his owl. Have you seen Harry? Apparently he's just wandering about the house. You know, like, obviously I'm not the greatest actress. I'm not even claiming to be a better actress than Bonnie Wright or anything like that. I'm just doing that to show that, like, the lines are bad, but if you use a little bit of personality, you can make them manageable. They don't have to be so bad. And I do want to be fair to Wright and say that maybe she did try and act it in different ways, and the directors just didn't go with those cuts, or they specifically told her to act it in this very stilted, uncomfortable way. I have no idea what went on behind the scenes. All I know is that that is not my Ginny. Alright, so another best for Harry Potter, we have Alan Rickman as Severus Snape.
He must die. After all this time. Always.
Similarly to Emma Watson, he's one of those characters where I just cannot get him and his portrayal out of my head when I'm reading the books. On paper, I think a lot of Snape's behaviors is like really cartoonish and over the top and exaggerated, and yet there is no point while watching these movies where I'm like, oh my god, like this guy is just being silly, I can't take him seriously. Like the way he talks, and also the way he, like, whenever he comes around a corner, he like flips his cape. It's just so goofy, but like somehow it works for Snape and it doesn't make him less threatening. I just don't know how he did it. And I also think Rickman is very good at playing this role of an ambiguous character, because I think at first, like as a first-time viewer, you can read a lot of his emotions and behaviors and movements as like evil or contempt or indifference, when on rewatches, as you're watching, you can like see in his face like the cogs turning, him realizing what he has to do, him realizing he has to stay in character. And I think a great example of this is the scene where Harry tells Severus that he believes Sirius Black is currently being held in the Department of Mysteries, and he does it in this very like riddle way because he's just been caught by Umbridge, and so he can't just straight out say it. And in the moment, Snape just sort of looks at him and then like tells Umbridge like, I have no idea what he's talking about. And then he like walks away. But on rewatch, if you look at his face, you can see like that moment of like recognition as to what he's saying, like, okay, I gotta do something, here's what I gotta do, I'm still Snape, here's my game face on. Like, it just, there's so much subtlety in his acting that I think works so well for such a morally ambiguous character, and a character that as viewers and readers we're not supposed to understand whether he's evil or not up until the very end. Then for our next worst, I have a double feature, and it's Michael Gambon and Richard Harris as Dumbledore.
What happened down in the dungeons between you and Professor Quirrell is a complete secret. So, naturally, The whole school knows.
Everything is a conspiracy theory.
I protest!
Harry!
I protest!
Harry, did you put your name in a goblet of fire?
No, sir.
You asked one of the oldest students to do it for you?
No, sir.
You're absolutely sure?
Yes, sir.
Unfortunately, I don't think we got a good adaptation of Dumbledore, and that's really sad because I really love Dumbledore. I think Gambon and Harris are like two sides of a pendulum when Dumbledore should be right in the middle. I think Harris played him very calm and very old, and obviously I know Richard Harris was an old man, so like, yeah, he's gonna come off as old, and like Dumbledore is really old. He's at that point maybe like 109 years old or something, but he is described to be very childlike and joyous. So having him played almost like he's tired really took away from the charm and whimsy of Dumbledore. And on the other end of the spectrum, we have Michael Gambon, who Dumbledore did not ask calmly, and I'll leave it at that. Another best in the Harry Potter world, Helena Bonham Carter as Bellatrix Lestrange.
He knows how to play. Itty bitty baby Potter.
Bellatrix Lestrange.
Neville Longbottom, is it? How's Mum and Dad?
Quite frankly, this is going to be our last best for the Harry Potter category, but quite frankly, I think the majority of actors could be on this best list. I think Harry Potter has great casting and great acting. And I think Helena Bonham Carter is a fucking genius in this role. I think she plays this kind of Harley Quinn-esque crazy woman very well. I think she has great range in this role. She shows so many intense emotions, from happiness, elation, fear, rage. Like, she is all over the board and it works so well. And I also think that she perfectly captures that like joy and ecstasy that she gets when dueling or fighting or torturing someone, where you have people like Lucius Malfoy or Peter Pettigrew who are bad people. They definitely are not good people, but at the same time, in their actions, you can see that they're like constantly afraid. They are terrified of Voldemort, and there is very clearly a line for them somewhere in there that they have been forced to cross that they are really struggling with. Bellatrix doesn't have that line. She looks outright happy when she is in these situations. Like, she revels in evilness in a way that most other Death Eaters do not, and I think Bonham Carter plays that perfectly. And for our last worst for the Harry Potter series, we have Geraldine Somerville and Adrian Rollins as Lily and James Potter.
You've been so brave, sweetheart.
You're nearly there, son.
Now, I know this might feel unfair because they weren't really in the movie at all, but that kind of adds to why they're here. They are on this list purely because they are too old. And I know what you're thinking. Olivia, you put Alan Rickman in the best spot, and he is 30 years too old to be playing Snape. I hear you. The reason why someone like Alan Rickman can still go in the best spot despite being so much older than his character, meanwhile Geraldine and Adrian are in this category because of their age, is because characters like Snape have so much to do that Rickman has the opportunity to prove to me with his acting why he is the best decision for this role. Meanwhile, when it comes to Harry's parents, they're not doing much, so really the only thing we have to go off with them is their appearance, and I do think them being aged up is quite detrimental to their character. Like, it's obviously heartbreaking for them to die at literally any age, but them being 21 adds a whole other layer to this. 21 is incredibly young. I'm 23 right now. I cannot comprehend the fact that I have outlived Lily and James Potter by multiple years. I also think it makes scenes like Harry walking through the Forbidden Forest with the Resurrection Stone way more impactful when you think about the fact that he is almost the same age as his parents at that point. He is looking at them and they might as well be his peers. And I think that's so heartbreaking, and something, I watched a Movie Flame video recently and he brought up something that I personally hadn't thought about up until that point, and it was the fact that by the time Harry's like in his mid to late 20s, he's gonna stop hearing about how much he looks like his father. And I think that's one of those things where he'll look back and feel like he took it for granted, because there are points where Harry gets like legitimately annoyed at people saying, oh, you look like your father with your mother's eyes. He like cuts them off and is like, yeah, with my mother's eyes, I get it. Which is very understandable, because it's like this kid's entire life is basically revolved around his parents' death. Sometimes he just doesn't want to fucking hear about his parents, and also he's just heard it so many times. It's like, I get it, thank you, okay. But I feel like once he gets older and he realizes that he's no longer hearing that, and realizes that it's because he has outlived his parents and nobody knows what James would have looked like, I think that's kind of a moment where he would be like, oh my god, I would give anything to hear that I look like my father again. So yeah, I just thought that was like a beautiful and really sad part of that I hadn't really ever thought about. All that being said, I do understand that like if you age up one adult character, you kind of have to age up the rest, because like you can't have Snape be in his 50s and then Lily and James be in their 20s when they were supposed to go to school together. So I understand why it happened. I just do think that it was an unfortunate decision to age up the adult characters, but I think it makes it a lot more impactful. And I also think it drives home the fact that like this war is not that far gone, and that Harry's experience is not very different from his own parents' experience. Okay, next for a best, we're moving out of Harry Potter. We have a best, and it's kind of a cheat. It's 4 in 1, and it is Saoirse Ronan, Florence Pugh, Emma Watson, and Eliza Scanlon as the March sisters.
Joe, we've been up for hours.
What have you been writing?
Oh, I got carried away with our delicious revenge play last night. Poison.
No poison. It's Christmas.
Christmas won't be Christmas without any presents.
I think each of them are perfect in their role. I think Emma Watson is perfect as this like kind of strict maternal older sister. I think Saoirse Ronan is perfect as this more wild tomboy writer. I think Eliza Scanlon is perfect as sweet, shy little Beth, and I think Florence Pugh is perfect as kind of that more superficial, maybe a little like whiny. I will say I do have an issue with how, and by the way, I'm talking about Little Women 2019 if that wasn't clear, I do have an issue with how they were playing both timelines. Like they had the same actors playing both timelines, and I think if you're not already familiar with the story of Little Women, whether that be the book or a previous adaptation, it's definitely a little confusing to have like these 25-year-olds trying to play 11-year-olds, and the timeline just isn't super clear. But that's not an issue with the acting, that's an issue with the direction. And specifically, I just want to shout out Florence Pugh, because I think she acts Amy in a really great way, where it's like, I think as an audience we are predisposed to kind of judge her because she is very shallow. She is kind of, you know, modern day gold digger. But Florence Pugh's performance makes us understand that like Amy is not doing anything wrong. She is simply hoping for the best that a woman at that time can hope for.
And as a woman, there's no way for me to make my own money. Not enough to earn a living or to support my family. And if I had my own money, which I don't, that money would belong to my husband the moment we got married. And if we had children, they would be his, not mine. They would be his property. So don't sit there and tell me that marriage isn't an economic proposition, because it is. It may not be for you, but it most certainly is for me.
Joe is the one who's like delusional as shit. Amy's just accepted that like, well, if my life is going to revolve around who I marry, hopefully I marry someone wealthy so that I can at least be afforded the ability to do art and travel and be able to buy the fabrics I want for my dresses. Like, there's really nothing wrong with what Amy wants. She isn't like whiny and annoying, but she's also a kid. Okay, now we're gonna move into Game of Thrones, and this is when I think things maybe start to get a little controversial. So our first worst for Game of Thrones is Finn Jones as Loras Tyrell. And I want to be careful with talking about this because I am going to be bringing up his appearance, and I don't want it to come off as though I'm degrading his appearance in any way or really even commenting on his attractiveness. So the reason Finn Jones is here is because in the books, Loras Tyrell is described as like otherworldly. Like he takes off his helmet and all the ladies of the court are sitting there like, oh my god, he's very charming. He comes up and he gives Sansa his little like flower something, whatever it's called. And I just don't think Finn Jones got across that charming Loris very well. There was nothing about Finn that like stuck out to me as like, oh, who is this man? Who is the Knight of Flowers? And to be so very clear, that is not me calling Finn Jones ugly in any way. Obviously, this man is incredibly freaking attractive. What I am saying is when your cast looks like this, being super attractive is not enough to have you stand out above the rest. And Loris does stand out. So what we need from an actor is an extreme amount of charm, and I just don't think Finn Jones provides that. So again, this is not me saying he's too unattractive for the role. This is me saying he doesn't have the charm to stand out from all the other incredibly attractive men. Next up, continuing with Game of Thrones, we have a best. We have Diana Rigg as why can't I fucking say this? Diana Rigg as Olenna Tyrell.
A shocking scene. Not at all what I intended. You see, I'd never seen the poison work before. Tell Cersei. I wanted to know it was me.
My God, I don't know if there could have been better casting for Olenna. She is perfect at getting across this calm, stern, maternal vibe while at the same time being very... Is there a bee? It's a fly. At the same time being very threatening and conniving and showing that she is one of the best players in the Game of Thrones. At points, she is the only character that you feel like you can trust. And when you see Sansa in her presence, you're like, oh, thank God, someone to protect her. And then at the same time, she is someone to be feared, and you don't really understand her full motivations. And I think Diana Rigg plays that really well. I also just think Diana Rigg is fucking stunning. And as we just talked about, the Tyrells are said to be an incredibly attractive family. So, you know, physically, she's got that down. All right. Here's where we start to collect some haters on this channel. My next worst is Gwendolyn Christie as Brienne of Tarth.
And it was wonderful. None of the boys noticed how mulish and tall I was. Till I saw a few of the boys sniggering. And then they all started to laugh. They couldn't keep the game going any longer. They were toying with me. Brienne the Beauty, they called me. Great joke. And I realized I was the ugliest girl alive. A great lumbering beast.
Hear me out. Hold your fire, please. Please. I love Gwendolyn Christie in this role. Brienne is one of my favorite characters in the TV show. I think she brings a charm to the character that her book counterpart sorely lacks. This is also, I should mention, I've only read the first, second, and part of the third book so far, so if anything I'm saying you're like, that doesn't align at all with the sixth book, it's because I haven't read the sixth book yet. Christie brings this charm to the character that her book counterpart sorely lacks, while also maintaining those core traits of loyalty and honor to the point of maybe sometimes ignorance and recklessness. She's incredibly headstrong. In the books, Jaime is constantly talking about how much of a dunce Brienne is, but I don't think Brienne is actually stupid. I think she's just simple. And I don't mean that, I know that word has been used like derogatorily towards people with mental disabilities and stuff. That's not how I'm using it. I quite literally mean simple. She has a one-track mind. Honor and loyalty is the biggest thing to her, and so when she's given this mission, that is the only thing she's going to focus on because that is the only thing that is important to her. That doesn't mean she's incapable of understanding anything else going around her. It just means she doesn't care because it feels irrelevant to her current mission. And when we exist in a universe where everyone is so conniving and smart and manipulative, someone who's really straightforward and blunt and sees the world in a very kind of black and white way can come off as a little bit stupid. But she's not, and I think Christie plays that very well. Like, you can see on her face as she's acting that she's playing this character so that the character understands what is happening. She understands when she's the butt of the joke. She understands when she's being used or degraded, but she also just has different priorities than other characters in this book, and those other characters can't understand why her priorities don't align with them. So if I've just spent this entire time complimenting Gwendolyn Christie, why is she on the worst list? it's purely because I think she is too beautiful to play this role. Brienne is described as extremely homely. Pretty much every character she comes across describes her as being quite unattractive, and Gwendolyn Christie is just simply not unattractive. She's gorgeous. And so I think not only as viewers does it kind of come off a little weird when we're sitting there watching her tell this story about how, like, she was tricked as a young girl into thinking a man liked her, and the whole point was just to make fun of her because she was so ugly, and how could anyone love her? And as viewers, we're just kind of sitting there like, what do you mean? Her? Gwendolyn, we're talking about her, right? And what? Like, I know she's tall, but she's just simply not unattractive in any way. And I also think it says something about Jaime, the relationship he has with Brienne. To be fair, I think in the books it doesn't get romantic, at least not as far as Martin has written. But for someone so superficial and obsessed with appearance as Jaime is, for him to end up in any sort of close relationship with Brienne, whether that is a friendship or a romantic relationship, whatever, I think it really shows his value for honor. To be clear, I'm not saying like Jaime's some great person because he treated an ugly person like a human. Absolutely not. I'm not saying that. But I am saying for Jaime specifically, again, someone who's super superficial and just like a kind of a piece of shit, for him to get over that shows how much he values honor. Does that make sense? And so I think by her being super pretty, it's like, well, yeah, why wouldn't Jaime want to get with her? She looks like that. Next up for best, we have Jack Gleeson as Joffrey Baratheon.
Robb Stark is dead. And his bitch mother. Write back to Lord Frey. Thank him for his service and command him to send Robb Stark's head. I'm going to serve it to Sansa at my wedding feast.
Your Grace.
Again, I don't know if I have to explain this one. I think this is one of the most praised acting performances in television history, maybe ever. He's so punchable. He's so punchable. He's so punchable. Every single time Joffrey Baratheon is on my screen, I feel a visceral rage, and that's how you know that you have played this character perfectly, because that is exactly what Joffrey Baratheon should be evoking from you. Gleeson is just perfect at playing this whiny, entitled, sociopathic, annoying-ass little boy who thinks he knows so much better than everyone else, when in reality he doesn't, and he is fucking everything up, and his uncle and his mother and everyone around him is just following around picking up the pieces as quickly as they can because he's the king and they have to do what he says even though he's an idiot. Y'all are gonna really hate me for this next one. Like, really hate me. For my next worst, I don't even want to say it. I have Peter Dinklage as Tyrion Lannister.
Never forget what you are. The rest of the world will not. Wear it like armor, and it can never be used to hurt you.
What the hell do you know about being a bastard?
All dwarves are bastards in their father's eyes.
Guys, hold. Peter Dinklage as Tyrion Lannister is fucking phenomenal. Do not get me wrong. He is one of the best actors in that entire show. He is absolutely my favorite character in the show and in the books. I think he plays Tyrion's personality perfectly. The entire reason he's on this list is for the exact same reason as Gwendolyn Christie. I think he's really hot, and his book character is not supposed to be hot. And I think it changes the dynamics and understanding of Tyrion as a character when he is really hot, because the unfortunate reality is that ableism and pretty privilege are very real things in our real world and in this fantasy world, and they do affect people. And so in the books, when Tyrion is able to come out on top and win over people, you know that it's because of his intelligence and his wit and his cunning. In the show, it's kind of just like, well, yes, this charming, attractive man is telling you to do something. It's kind of less surprising that so many people are willing to, like, hear him out and follow him along. And again, I'm not saying that's how it should be. I'm not saying we should be listening to people because they're more attractive than others. But I am saying that in this world and in our own world, the reality is, when given the option between listening to someone who is very attractive and very charming versus a man who does not have a nose, has heterochromia, has a twisted leg, people are unfortunately going to be way more willing to listen to Peter Dinklage's Tyrion than book Tyrion, purely because of how Peter Dinklage looks. And so I think it changes a lot of the character dynamics, and it de-emphasizes how intelligent and cunning Tyrion is, because there's less of an obstacle that he has to cross. And I want to be so careful with this, because I am talking about a disability, and one that I do not relate to, nor do I have experience in. So I'm not saying that just because Peter Dinklage is attractive means that he doesn't have any obstacles to cross, and that it completely takes away from any ableism that Tyrion faces in the show. That's not the truth at all. I hope my point got across understandably. And I love Peter Dinklage. I love Peter Dinklage's Tyrion. I love Tyrion. Okay, next we have another best. Similar to Little Woman, we're kind of cheating and putting 4 in 1, because their dynamic as a group is more important than their ability as individuals. And that is Will Wheaton, Corey Feldman, River Phoenix, and Jerry O'Connell as Gordy, Teddy, Chris, and Vern in Stand By Me. The book version is called The Body.
I suppose this is fun for you.
No, but this is.
Come on, Teddy, act your age.
This is my age. I'm in the prime of my youth, and I'll only be young once.
Yeah, but you're gonna be stupid for the rest of your life.
You just signed your own death warrant.
I haven't talked about this IP much on my channel, but like, just know that this is the most important movie to me in my entire life. No movie or show means more to me than Stand By Me. And I think these boys are perfect in the role. I think their dynamic and their chemistry together is so natural and believable, and they just embody the book version so well. And to be fair, I think they have kind of an advantage, because the movie is like almost word for word the same as the book. I haven't read the book in a little while, but I remember having the thought of like, man, there's really only 2 differences between the book and the movie. Number 1, in the movie, Vern has a comb. And number 2, in the movie, Teddy isn't saying the N-word every other fucking sentence. Stephen King, why do you like to say the N-word so much? Not necessary. And I think the unfortunate reality is a lot of the reason why each of these actors is so good at being able to play their role is because they are very similar to their characters. And the reason I say unfortunately is because at least 3 out of 4 of those characters are characterized by trauma, and the way they are, and the reason they are the way they are is because they're like neglected and abused by their parents. So it's unfortunate for me to feel like these actors did such a great job because they were able to relate, but that's just the reality. And I just think, I don't know if I've ever seen a more talented group of child actors, if I'm being quite honest. Oh God, we're back into having people hate me. We're moving on into Hunger Games. I only have 1 worst, and then I'm gonna go into 2 bests for the Hunger Games, and then we're gonna finish off this video. So in the worst position, we have Jennifer Lawrence as Katniss Everdeen. I think Jennifer Lawrence, similarly to Gwendolyn Christie and similarly to Peter Dinklage, I think Jennifer Lawrence plays the personality of Katniss phenomenally. I think it is simply a superficial issue that I have. Essentially, my entire issue with this comes down to the fact that Katniss Everdeen is a starving teenager and Jennifer Lawrence is a healthy adult. To be clear, let me just say this right off the bat, I do not think there is an ethical solution to my problem, and therefore I'm not that upset about it. It is just a little something that I do think, let's just get into it. I think it does do a disservice to the story when most of the tributes are adults. And to be fair, you know, a lot of them are like 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, so they're young adults, but they are still adults. They do not look like they are 14, 15, 16, 17. And I think that does take away from just how horrific the Hunger Games are. Again, like, obviously, the Hunger Games are so fucked up no matter who is in it, but it being children is so much more impactful. When I'm reading the book and I'm imagining, like, actual middle school and high school aged children in this position, it is so much worse than seeing adults go through it. Again, like, it's awful no matter what, but I think you know what I mean. Additionally, I think the appearance of the actors kind of dilutes how dire the situation is in the districts, especially in districts like 11 or 12, because every single one of them is perfectly well fed. They clearly have their nice, healthy 3 meals a day, as you should, and that's great for them. But that doesn't really get across the fact that these people are starving. And I think I want to highlight one particular scene, and it's the scene under the tree where Peeta throws the bread to Katniss. I have seen so many misunderstandings and misinterpretations of this scene from movie viewers, and I think it largely boils down to the fact that the actor's appearance isn't aligning with what the story is trying to tell us. So I've seen a lot of people either think that Peeta wasn't even trying to throw the bread at Katniss and she just like came over and grabbed it, or they think he was throwing it at her to like get her to shoo, or they think it was really degrading that he would throw it into the mud and like be like, go pick it up, like act like she's a pig or a dog. And I think all of those misunderstandings come from the fact that people are not understanding the situation that Katniss is in at that moment. They are not understanding that Katniss is quite literally in that moment actively dying. She is under that tree because she has lost all ability to go on. Her body is so weak it has given up on her, and she is sitting under that tree actively dying. She will be dead within hours. Peeta throwing her that bread not only saves her life, it saves her entire family's life, because if Katniss died, Prim would have died, and Astrid would have died. Peeta saved the entire Everdeen family, and I think people just aren't understanding that, which is such a bummer because that is such a big deal, and that is a huge reason why Katniss has this dynamic with Peeta that she does, where she feels so conflicted because he's done this amazing thing for her. He literally saved her life, and at the same time, her as a person cannot stand the fact that she owes him something. She feels like he owes him something. Of course, Peeta doesn't feel that way at all. If she had said that to Peeta, he'd be like, what the fuck? You don't owe me anything. Like, you were dying. But she cannot handle the fact that she feels like she owes him something, and she's resentful of him for that. And so I feel like this lack of understanding about where Katniss was at prior to learning to hunt really, really, really does a disservice to the character and the dynamics and the overall story. And to be fair, I'm not fully blaming that on the actor's appearances. I think the direction choices in that scene were very weird. I think they don't really make it clear enough just how abusive Peeta's mother is, and they don't even show the part where like Katniss looks down at school like the next day or a couple days after or whatever and sees this flower. Like, Peeta not only saves her life in that moment, but Peeta is also the reason why Katniss remembers that she could learn how to hunt. So Peeta continuously saves her life. And that's not the only like misunderstanding. I think there's also just stuff of like, why is Gale's name in there 42 times when he and his whole family look perfectly healthy and well fed? Why is everyone acting like Katniss is some underdog in the games when she is clearly one of the oldest and biggest tributes? If you're, just going based off of like physical appearance of the actors, why is she in a dire situation where she's sitting under a tree when this, again, perfectly healthy grown woman could just get up and get a job? Like, there's just so much misunderstanding that comes because people aren't understanding how dire a situation Katniss and other tributes are in. And again, just a reminder, I really don't think there's like an ethical solution to this other than making the series animated. It's just not ethical to ask your actors to lose enough weight to the point where they appear starving, especially not a child actor. So as much as like I'm putting this on the worst casting list, I am not ever sitting watching the movie being like, ah, they should have a starving child here instead. Like, no, fuck no. And while we're on the topic of Katniss, I do think that there is like a bit of an elephant in the room, and that is her race. A lot of people strongly feel that Katniss should not have been cast as a white person, that she should have been cast as an indigenous person. My take on this is that I think people are forgetting that race is a social construct, and that our social construct is entirely different from Panem's social construct. Now, does that mean everyone is default white? No. I mean, take Rue or Thresh, despite the fact that the word black is never used to describe them because black is not a thing in Panem, they're very clearly described to be black people. You know, what we would refer to as black people. So I do think there are definitely some implications and ways to read the book in which it can come across as though Katniss might be an indigenous American or Hispanic or Mediterranean, something like that. I just also think maybe people, how do I say this? I just think people are like a little bit too caught up on what race Katniss is, when it's like, you're not understanding that Katniss isn't any of these races, because Katniss lives in Panem, which has an entirely different social construct of race. Again, that doesn't mean she defaults to being white. I just think people are too particular about what race she is. I also think when we think about a society set in North America, specifically United States of America, in the future, the reality is there's not going to be a lot of like direct ancestral lineage in the way that we still currently have. Like for me, I could definitely say like, oh yeah, I'm very European. I don't think that I have a single ancestor who hasn't come down that line from Europe and come down the line of the Mayflower, right? But 100 years in the future, 200 years in the future, I don't think we're going to have these straight ancestral lineages as much anymore, and so I think the whole concept and the way we currently define race is going to get so irrelevant and muddled. I guess that's kind of my point with Katniss. I personally, in my head, I do imagine Katniss as being a little bit darker than Jennifer Lawrence. I imagine her as having a little bit more tan skin. I imagine her hair being black more than it is that light brown that Lawrence has. Her eyes are like a dark gray in my head. So I do see why people see Katniss as being a person of color and wish that a person of color was cast in that role. But I just, again, I'm personally, and this is just a personal thing, I'm not too fussed about it just because there really is no understanding of what race Katniss is. And I think there's so much more to say about this, like the historical context of Italian immigrants coming to the Appalachians to be coal miners and stuff like that. There's so much that you could get into. I think Collins is a genius with the world building, but that's just personally, A, not what I'm here to do in this video, and B, not really my area of expertise. So I'm just gonna kind of leave it at that, of like, I'm personally not too fussed about what race Katniss is, but I understand why other people feel so strongly about what race Katniss is. That was our last worst. We only have 2 bests coming up, and they're both in the Hunger Games. So the first one is going to be Donald Sutherland as President Snow.
I've been watching you, and you watching me. I'm afraid we've both been played for fools. Oh, my dear Miss Evertine, I thought we'd agreed never to lie to each other.
He's perfect in this role. I genuinely think this is like one of my favorite acting roles, like across the board of all time. I think Sutherland perfectly gets across the dynamic between Katniss and Snow, where it's like, despite the fact that they are enemies, they are the direct opposition to one another, there's this level of respect that they have for each other, and like Snow seems to almost be entertained by Katniss. Like, I personally view Sejanus, Haymitch, and Katniss as like building blocks of rebellion, and I think it's almost exciting and entertaining to Snow to feel like he's finally met his match. It wasn't Sejanus, it wasn't Haymitch, and here it is. She's finally here. It's Katniss. I think he secretly maybe not so secretly loves that, and I think that Sutherland gets that across super well, where it's almost like a cat and mouse game. Yes, there's a lot at stake, but Snow's having a really good time. Snow, like, really respects Katniss and is really intrigued by her. And I think the scene where Katniss kills Coin instead of Snow is such a great example of this, and such a great example of the way that Sutherland chooses to act this. Like, the way he laughs, and just also the way he's, like, looking at Katniss before she does it, he knows. You can see in Sutherland's acting that Snow knows Katniss is going to shoot Coin. He's not going to shoot Snow. He is sitting there smirking like, what are you gonna do? Did you believe me? And I think it also, again, just says so much about this dynamic between Katniss and Snow, where it's like Katniss does believe him. Katniss has enough respect for Snow to understand that he is telling the truth and that Coin is a bad guy. And the thing is, Snow is not sitting there laughing and being so smug because, oh, he gets to survive all of a sudden because she's killing Coin instead, so now Snow gets to live. Snow's dying one way or another. Either he's getting killed by Katniss, he's getting killed by the citizens, or he's already dying. Like, he's not smug because he thinks he won. He's smug because he, in that moment, is, like, seeing... I don't even know how to explain it, but, like, he's seeing that respect between him and Katniss play out. He's seeing that he was right all along about who Katniss was. And again, do I think Snow really gives a fuck about what happens to this country after he has passed? No, because he's a narcissist. All he cares about is himself and how he looks, and once he's dead, that's not going to matter to him. So I truly think this whole thing with him and Katniss and Coin is, like, truly just an entertainment thing to him, and him wanting to see what kind of relationship he and Katniss has with each other. And again, this is about the acting. My whole point with all of this is that Sutherland's acting gets across all of this so well. I do have to say, I was pretty bummed that Kiefer Sutherland did not accept the position to be Snow, just not only because I just can't imagine anyone but a Sutherland playing this role as well. Obviously, I'm sorry, I don't know the actor's name, but young Snow from The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, I think he did great, but that's just not the Snow we come to know. So I was bummed that it won't be Kiefer reprising this role, but I also, of course, completely understand why he would turn down the role. I assume he was offered the role. I can't imagine they didn't, and I do understand why he would turn it down. I think that would be incredibly difficult to have to play your father's role just a few years after he died. And I also just think maybe it wasn't a role that interested him, and that's totally okay. So, like, absolutely no hate or shade to Kiefer for not accepting the role, but it did hurt my heart a little bit when it wasn't him. Nervous but excited to see what Ralph Fiennes does with President Snow. So I started singing a song called Nervous but Excited. Everyone can hear you. I hope someone knows what I'm referencing.
People can hear you. Everyone can hear you.
All right, and our last best is Stanley Tucci as Caesar Flickerman.
Ladies and gentlemen, your master of ceremonies, Caesar Flickerman.
Welcome to the 74th Annual Hunger Games! Are you excited? Let me hear it!
I fucking love Stanley Tucci. He is one of my favorite actors of all time. I don't think I've seen a single thing that I've watched and been like, man, the Tooch just didn't do it for me in that film. No, the Tooch always does it for me. Tooch touches me right here in my heart, okay? He brought Caesar to life in such a fun and charming way that, like, you can't help but love him as a character even if you hate him as a person. Like, he is an awful fucking person. It's Caesar Flickerman is not Stanley Tucci. God, I hope Stanley Tucci's not an awful person. But the way Tucci plays it is just like, yeah, if I was a capitalist citizen, I would also be sitting there, like, laughing and getting so excited for these interviews and so excited for the recaps. And all I'm saying is, Nick Viall and Andy Cohen, take some notes, because you could have a way more exciting reunion if you took a couple notes from the Tooch. Now that I say that, do you think Caesar Flickerman is based on Andy Cohen? Because there's like a very real possibility that that is true, considering we know Collins wrote the book based off of flipping back and forth between the war and a Real Housewives show. Is Caesar Flickerman meant to be Andy Cohen? What the fuck? I've never thought about it that way. I think Tucci might be my favorite casting in this entire franchise because while Sutherland encapsulates Snow perfectly, Tucci adds to Caesar in a way that brings him to life while also not changing the character in any real way, in my opinion. And I also think it just brings so much personality to the concept of this being like a reality TV show. Like, he really makes it feel like this is a big production and this is a big entertainment moment, and it makes you a lot more understandable as to why citizens are so invested in this. I think with a good host, you can get people invested in pretty much anything. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the best and worst casting for book to movie adaptations. Please don't hate me. I hope that I explained all my reasoning well and people can either agree, or if you disagree, like, do it respectfully and understand where I'm coming from and not just think I'm like a hater. Like, subscribe, comment. My last video was about sorting Hunger Games characters into Hogwarts houses. Video before that was talking about whether book couples would last in real life. Video before that was talking about literary men that I would cover my drink around. If you really like Hunger Games, I have a couple videos about Sunrise on the Reaping. Yeah, this was a long video. I'm not gonna enjoy editing this one, but I enjoyed writing it out. I enjoyed having all these thoughts. I enjoyed making it, so hopefully I'll enjoy the end product.